Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to hear about depth hypnosis. And let's do something that I always like to do before I start teaching. I know this is a book reading, but you leave me alone for any 2 or 3 minutes at a time and I start teaching, so I'll probably be teaching. So let's go ahead and do something that we always do, which is to open circle. And I'm going to say a phrase, and you can say it after me. The sun is a circle.
The sun is a circle.
The moon is a circle.
The moon is a circle.
The earth is a circle.
The earth is a circle.
The drum is a circle.
The drum is a circle.
We are a circle within a circle.
We are a circle within a circle.
Thank you. That's a shamanic way of setting space, creating a container for the experience that you're getting ready to engage in. And I feel like it's very auspicious that we open circle with the ringing of the church bells. So I like ecumenical events. So my name is Isa Gucciardi. I wrote this book with Laura Chandler, who's actually a much better writer than I am. So if you think it's well written, it's because of her. I mean, all the content is mine, but I've been writing this book for 22 years. I've written it 4 times, and 4 times decided that it wasn't quite done, completely done. So now it's here, and it's still not quite done. But that's kind of the way it is with depth hypnosis. You never really are done. That's kind of the way it is with consciousness, right? You're never actually done. Although we would like to believe that. So let me just read a little bit out of the book, and then I'm going to talk, since we're here in a Dharma center, I'm going to talk about the Buddhist influence on depth hypnosis. Depth hypnosis is a spiritual counseling model that incorporates Buddhism, shamanism, integrated energy medicine, hypnosis, and transpersonal psychology. And actually, maybe I should talk about how it came about. I actually I was running a translation company downtown San Francisco. It was the height of the .com. I had 2 small children. I was only working 9 to 3 because I wanted to be there with cookies and milk at 3, but that meant I was working all night. And I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And I realized, I don't want to take this medicine that they say that I have to take until I die. So I'm going to go back to my meditation practice, which I had been a practicing Buddhist since I was 18. And I was 38 at the time, 39. But I got 2 small kids and a business downtown and a house to run, meditation takes a smaller amount of time. So I went back to my meditation practice. I'd also been studying shamanism for almost that long. I had been drawn into shamanic practice through my work as an artist, as a potter. And I was really interested in pit firing. And when you're interested in pit firing, you wind up in indigenous environments. So I was always very curious about these other people besides the people I was studying with. And so I got involved with shamanic practice. So I thought, I really have to go back to these healing practices that I know. And I think I'm going to go ahead and sell my business and go back to school and get my Ph.D. in transpersonal psychology all at the same time. So, and at that same time, I decided to get a certificate in hypnosis because I started seeing a hypnotherapist. And that was actually the thing that kind of turned the corner for me on healing, helping me really dig in and, do the energetic healing that was needed for this disease. And I thought, and that was when I thought, if this is healing me, I want to do this for other people. So that's, even though it was so like the .com, those of you that were around back then, you remember how heady it was. And, we were translating, we did the first translation of Works, Word, and well, works in Word into French, Spanish, and Italian, and German. And we did it without a computer, right? There was like, we did it with Mac pluses, you know. So yeah, so that was happening after having spent years translating patents, you know, translating personal documents, birth certificates. Suddenly there's like all this going on in the business world there. So I stepped off the dot-com train and went back to school, and as I got my certificate to do hypnotherapy with other people, and I sat down to do hypnotherapy, you know, when people think about hypnotherapy, they think about stopping smoking, they think about fear of flying, helping with fear of flying, they think about, you know, fear in speaking in public, you know, other types of phobias, other types of addictions. And, you know, as I was sitting down to do the traditional kind of suggestion hypnosis, which depth hypnosis incorporates, but suggestion hypnosis is really kind of giving suggestions for change to the subconscious mind. It's very helpful, very positive tool. But as I was doing this, I was realizing, you know, this person who is struggling with this addiction needs a power retrieval. Like, they're not going to make it if they don't have some kind of infusion of power. Now, how am I going to incorporate this shamanic method of bringing power back to a person without a drum and a rattle? You know, like this is 1998. Okay, so back then, body, spirit, mind was still a theory. You know, people were not. If you wanted to do any kind of energy healing for people in a hospital environment, you had to pretend it was therapeutic touch. You know, I don't know if you remember this, but, and, you know, I was working even with Michael Harner, I was working with him as a medium, and he was like, no, you can't bring shamanism into this therapeutic, you know, environment. That's a no, you can't do it. And I'm like, you need to do it, you know? So how am I going to do this? How am I going to bring these shamanic practices in to this environment? And so I began experimenting with translating a lot. You know, I spent all those years as a professional translator, translating from one verbal environment to another, not knowing I was being trained to try to translate from a nonverbal environment into a verbal environment, right? So I figured out ways of adapting shamanic practices into hypnotherapeutic processes. And I realized, you know, there is, you know, this idea of just, you know, quitting smoking is, you know, it's just the tip of the iceberg of this much larger path where, you know, people realize that their addiction is just a way that they have twisted away from their Buddha nature, you know. And how do we bring Buddha nature back into the therapeutic environment without having people feel like they're being proselytized, right? So I came up with a method of, which we call the first trance. If we have time tonight, we might do it, of helping people connect with this, and we call it this part of themselves that has only their highest good as its sole intent. Buddha nature by any other name, right? So I started bringing these different processes into the clinical setting as I was studying to get my Ph.D. And pretty soon, this other thing began to emerge. It was not hypnotherapy. It was not practice instruction in Buddhism. It was not your classic, you know, power retrieval, soul retrieval, shamanic practice. And it was very much infused with energy medicine. I've been working with subtle energies from a very young age. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I'm a natural medium, you know, so that's a whole other story I can tell you about. You can do therapy on me on that. But so working with energy medicine, working with rays, bringing in the power of light into the therapeutic setting to help people move through resistance and to help me stay in a place of balance. And kitty, there's a kitty. So So all of this was happening, and I'm getting my Ph.D. in transpersonal psychology, and I'm thinking, and I'm doing my doctoral dissertation on dreams, and I'm thinking, and I'm just bringing it all into the clinical setting as it's needed. And it's really interesting because depth hypnosis emerged in the clinical setting. It wasn't something that came out of my head. It was something that I felt this like intelligence just showing me, this is what is needed here, and this is how you can do it. And so that emerged. And by the end of my first year in practice, I had a waiting list of about almost 100 people. And I knew I wasn't going to be able, I was working 6 days a week, seeing 6 people a day. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to see everyone who wanted to do this work. So I decided to start teaching it. And that was when I decided to write the book, 1999. Yeah, right. So I did write the book, and there's a whole long story there about where it went and how it came back and all these things. So it's the depth hypnosis developed in the clinical setting, and when I started having to teach it, then I had to actually figure out what I was doing. And this book is an articulation of that. I've been trying for 25 years to explain what it is. I've been teaching now for that long, and I've trained thousands of people in all kinds of things, probably hundreds of people as depth hypnosis practitioners. And it's still evolving. It's an amazing amalgamation of so many beautiful things. And I have to say, I'm in awe. I feel humbled by it. It's in many ways, it's like a jewel that has all these different facets to it, that are all different parts of the work. And so I'm so happy to share, and so happy to be able to talk about it and share it with you. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the book. Depth hypnosis is a blend of ancient wisdom and contemporary psychological thought. It is an integrative therapeutic modality that uses the umbrella of transpersonal psychology to unify its multiple streams of understanding that includes hypnotherapy, Buddhist psychology, shamanism, energy medicine, altered states, and regression therapies. It's a big part of depth hypnosis, regression work. It uses a wide range of innovative techniques to help people navigate issues that inevitably arise in their lives. It can be difficult to grasp the complexity of our being, but it is possible to know ourselves much more fully. And knowing ourselves is at least part of the key to addressing our symptoms, issues, and problems in an effective and lasting way. As humans, we all have experiences that can cause us to fragment or compartmentalize. When this happens, we experience discomfort on a variety of levels that may present in different ways. In depth hypnosis, we are trying to understand ourselves at the deepest level. We are especially seeking clarity about the difficult places within us, the aspects we don't understand, and the elements within us that cause us to suffer emotionally, mentally, physically, and even spiritually. When we begin to look honestly at these places, we are stepping onto a path of consciousness. This is not an easy path. It is one a person can spend their entire lifetime avoiding. Yeah, I was kind of doing that, right? Yet the path of consciousness is rewarding. It's one that seeks to illuminate all aspects of the self, including what Carl Jung refers to as the shadow aspects, those untended parts of our experience that we have carefully tucked away out of sight. When we move towards being conscious, it is less about an arrival and more about the journey towards being fully awake to ourselves and to reality. We become more of who we are, clearing obscurations to perceiving our core wholeness in the process. So that's another way of saying what I just said, right? I'd like to, as I mentioned, just talk a little bit about Buddhism's effect on depth hypnosis. It's not as evident as the shamanic processes, where, basically Buddhism provides the sort of trajectory and context for the work. You're not just quitting smoking, you're trying to understand yourself at a deeper level. And when you try to understand yourself at a deeper level, you begin to understand that you actually have a spiritual path. And then once you begin to try to understand that spiritual path, you begin to go more deeply into yourself, So I kind of got to the place with my practice where I would like put my shingle out, stop smoking now, but actually what I was doing is like, learn about yourself and your Buddha nature and think about enlightenment. Like your smoking will bring you to enlightenment, and it will, if you try to understand the reasons why you're smoking, right? It will always lead you to a greater understanding of yourself. So the context of the depth hypnosis process is not just, of course, it's to feel better. And within the first 5 sessions or so, when someone comes in, they do get a shift in symptoms very quickly. Do you want me to tell you about what the sessions look like? Would that be helpful? Okay. Why don't we do a session? No, sorry. Okay. All right. I'm always up for that. So the way the sessions look is, there is suggestion hypnosis where if you want to do just one session and you want to try to, address fear of flying or something like that, we will sit down together and try to understand what are the solutions to your fears. And that's really different than traditional hypnotherapy, which has all kinds of scripts. If somebody has a fear of flying, you take this and you read this. And if somebody has a fear of speaking in public, you take this and you read this after you help them go into an altered state. In depth hypnosis, we don't do that. We help a person understand, what they're doing and what might make it better. Then we help them come up with the suggestions. And then we offer those suggestions to them once they have gone into an altered state of awareness that is brought forward through suggestions for relaxation. So that's suggestion hypnosis. And if you want to do depth hypnosis and you want to find out a little bit more, basically what we do is we take an emotional biography, kind of checking in with you at different moments in your life, what was happening emotionally, starting with your birth. Then we look at the dreams that you might have had since you've thought about coming in for help, because dreams are really key in depth hypnosis. I would say 40% of the sessions that I've ever done, of the thousands and thousands of sessions that I've ever done, have been informed by dreams. We've started with the dream. And in the 90s, when I was developing depth hypnosis, this is my favorite thing to say, so I'm just going to say it. That email, I know there was a world before email. I know many of you were born after that, but we were trying to figure out email. I was just like, what is this? So I used to give a talk called Dreams: Email from the Higher Self. I was so hip. But it really is, dreams are information from the higher self. They provide so much guidance. And so this very important part of that first session to see, what is the higher self asking for here? And then, of course, we take a biography of the presenting problem. So that's the first session. In the second session, we begin to work in the altered state of awareness. So almost all the work in depth hypnosis happens in that altered state of awareness, which is a little different from this place where we are right now, of the conscious mind, which is very helpful for driving and doing math and finding consensus. It's a very helpful state of mind. And it tends to filter out things that it finds disorganizing, including strong emotions, including trauma that we may not be able to come to terms with, including things that we would rather forget than remember. And so when people have symptoms such as depression or anxiety, autoimmune problems, post-traumatic stress kinds of problems, nightmares, losing time, difficulty focusing. These kinds of issues are generally the tip of the iceberg of something that the conscious mind has filtered out, right? And we have to, as Einstein said, you can't solve the problem at the level that it is occurring. So we work with the altered state of awareness to get beyond the conscious mind. And the first bit of altered state of awareness that we work with is the first trance, connecting with that part of the self that has only your highest good as its sole intent. So this is almost like a guided meditation, but it's not really a guided meditation because it's designed to evoke your own imagery. It's not imagery that's given to you. So we help a person connect with this part of the self, which they may encounter in their own terms. They may hear it, they may see it, they may feel its presence. It might be a light, it might be a sound, it might be a mythic or angelic being, it might be a person, it might be an animal, it might be a plant. However they experience that part of the self, that experience, that connection becomes the foundation of all of the work in depth hypnosis. And it becomes sort of the safe harbor that we return to as we begin to do the deeper work of going in with the emotional experience that is causing the person problems. So for instance, if someone is having a fear of flying, the main emotion there is fear. So we would actually go in on the fear. We would actually help the person move into an altered state of awareness, connecting with that part of the self, and then locating the fear in the body, working to translate that visceral experience into an energetic experience through asking, what color does it have? What does it have a temperature? Just getting an energetic pattern to emerge with our questions. And then we follow that energetic pattern to a situation, time, or place when they were first or most significantly experiencing that energetic pattern. And that's where the regression work comes in. So we may wind up in a time previous in this lifetime, in childhood or adolescence or infancy or in utero, or we might wind up in a past life experience. Wherever we wind up, we help them establish time and space in that place. We find out what kind of event is going on. It's almost always a traumatic event. And then we bring in shamanic processes of power retrieval, soul retrieval, working with that part of the self that has only the highest good as its sole intent, helping the person change their relationship to those originating circumstances. And then we count them out. And then what happens is there will be a shift in that fear of flying, almost not instantly, but very quickly. And so we may have to do, there may have been some kind of traumatic event where they were very, very afraid. We're working with that part of the self. We're working with the adult self to bring in resources so that they begin to feel a shift deeply within them, and so that they respond differently to external circumstances on the surface level of experience where the conscious mind is mediating reality for them. So that's, and then we do that again and again and again, depending on how complex the issue is, how deeply the person wants to go into their experience. But as I say, within the first 5 sessions, you generally get a shift. I mean, there's some people here that have done some depth hypnosis. Would you agree that that's true? Yeah. Would you agree that's true?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, Manny?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a process of, it's a very, for me as a practitioner, it's a very, it's a very you're working so deeply within the self, and it's such a privilege to be admitted into someone's deepest experience, and it's such a joy to be able to help. It's just wonderful to be able to help. So it helps. Depth hypnosis helps, So, in terms of going back to where I was going with trying to bring Buddhism here, because we're in a marvelous Dharma center, which I want to take a moment to thank everyone, Noam, all that you do, everyone. I know all of you participate and help this place keep going, and I just want to say thank you for inviting me here, and thank you for all that you do for keeping Buddhism in the streets, Yeah. So, and I often feel like doing depth hypnosis, sometimes I'll say I'm in the gutter of Buddhism, because it's like you're in the really toughest places with people, and that's not a gutter. That's not a gutter. But like I don't think of that as really a gutter. But you're like down low. You're like in it, And so the Buddhist contribution to depth hypnosis is this concept of moving toward a more enlightened state. That you're not just trying to. Yes, you are moving out of suffering, and it's suffering is a real encouragement for people to want to change, and so Buddhism figured that out a long time ago, right? What are you attached to? What are you avoiding? What kind of crazy idea you got going on in your head that's making you suffer? And depth hypnosis borrows heavily there, right? And so, when people are having a hard time, we meet them wherever they are. If they just want one session of suggestion hypnosis, no problem. If they want to do several sessions of just to understand enough to kind of get the symptoms to relax, that's fine. If they want to begin to really understand their deeper karmic patterns, this is where depth hypnosis really draws on Buddhism, because it's understood. So in depth hypnosis, when I'm teaching depth hypnosis, I say it's understood that any symptom that's happening on the surface level of experience is a function of how someone has twisted away from their Buddha nature. And the symptom is the indicator of the karmic pattern that is creating that twisting away. So we have immediately a context for understanding what we have a place to place this person's experience. And we are looking to try to understand what are these karmic patterns. So we actually have something that we call the compass, and that's something that I teach people like in the first or second day of the training to become a practitioner. And the compass is basically an energetic configuration that has on the one side the Buddhist understandings about the nature of suffering. So you're asking, when you're sitting with the person asking about their emotional biography, you're looking, you're listening. Where are the attachments? Where are the aversions? Where are the misunderstandings or core beliefs that they have that are incorrect? You're working with the Four Noble Truths as a navigational tool, as a diagnostic tool. You are bringing Buddhism into a very interactive process of transforming suffering. And then on the other side of the compass, we have what are the shamanic understandings of imbalance, which are power loss, soul loss, and energetic interference. The top of the compass, we have the understanding that the person has, that I have a higher self and that I have guides, and that the person that I'm working with has a higher self and that they have guides. And we are, constantly trying to listen to the higher self of the other person to see where we need to go, which is where the dreams come in so handy, right? So So immediately at the, you have the Four Noble Truths as a diagnostic tool. You have the understanding of the Buddha nature as the core wholeness. Depth hypnosis, like Buddhism, is the psychology of wholeness. We are moving back to wholeness. No matter what is happening, no matter what trauma you've been through, no matter how much fear you have, no matter how much resistance you have, we are moving toward wholeness. We are going to do that. And whatever we have to do to take your time to help you overcome resistance, help you take your time to overcome just the sense of overwhelm. We have so many tools that we can do that. And we have the context of Buddhism, knowing that we are not just reigniting trauma. We are bringing forward the karmic patterns that are behind that karma, that trauma, and we are transforming karmic patterns. That's what we are doing with depth hypnosis. And so we have this Buddhist concept of where we're working every day. And we, then there's also lots more, the deeper you go into helping someone understand what's going on, the more they want to understand about what's going on. And then you can get into, helping them understand things like, this is what's happening on the personality level, and this is what's happening on the soul level. And Buddhism, that might be called what's happening in relative reality and what's happening in ultimate reality. It's a rough translation, I get it, but it is a translation that works in the therapeutic environment. And Buddhism, provides this. Also, the other thing that Buddhism provides is this concept of reincarnation, this concept of moving across time, moving from lifetime to lifetime, unfortunately propelled by karmic forces, right? But it's okay, because we're going to find out what those karmic forces is by following the problems and unwinding them, But that is also a wonderful context, because when people, again, a lot of people come into depth hypnosis that are not interested in Buddhism or shamanism or energy medicine, and they don't have to be, because depth hypnosis is a good front end. They may never know they just had a soul retrieval. They just know they feel a whole lot better. They just know that trauma that they've been sitting on for 20 years is now shifting some way, So it just looks like, almost like talk therapy, not really, because we don't spend that much time talking, but we do spend plenty of time talking, but we spend more time in an altered state. It's an accessible way for people to step into another way of working. But so they don't have to have this concept of reincarnation. But if they were to consider for a moment, if it's very therapeutic to help someone who's suffering with the current issue that they're dealing with, to consider that this issue that they're dealing with is on a much larger timeline, that they've been working with this perhaps over lifetimes, and that they have more lifetimes to go where they can help, where this can get ironed out, and that we can work right now in this lifetime to with all of this space, right? It's really different than thinking, okay, I'm bored, I'm suffering, I'm gonna die, right? It's like Buddhism kind of gives air to everything, and people can hold their experience with more ease, and so that they can begin to dig into some of these very traumatic things that almost all of us have experienced. I think that being alive today, especially right now, it's very traumatizing. And as we sit with all of the difficulties that so many people are having, if we can hold this idea that, we can, in our own sphere, do whatever we can do to help whoever is in front of us, so that we can help them shift, so that they can turn around and help others shift. And then we are creating an alternative current to this crushing trauma trauma that's happening right now. So the wonderful thing for me, I think that's probably true for all of us as Buddhist practitioners, we have our practice. I was, I have to open a parenthesis. Sorry, I do that. At the Sacred Stream, I don't know if you know, but I founded a school for consciousness studies called the Sacred Stream, the Foundation of the Sacred Stream. So I would have a container to teach all of the material that was coming through that needed to be taught to help people become practitioners and help other people. So part of our remit is to invite other teachers and to bring other artists and to provide an environment for them to be able to bring forward their teachings and their artistry to the world. And one of the teachers that we invited, now I have to go back. So the first person that I wanted to invite when we established the Sacred Stream and we were going to have this as part of our mission was Thupten Jinpa, His Holiness's interpreter. And that's a whole long story. I'd love to tell you that story someday, when I first encountered him. But when I first encountered him, it was one of those experiences where, I was working as a translator at the time, and I really understand translation, like I know translation. And I'm watching him translate for His Holiness at this 4-day teaching, and I'm realizing he's not just translating the words, he's translating His Holiness's mind stream. And I'm like, and so I immediately burst into tears, and I spend the next 4 days in tears. And, this is like 1980 something, 89, I'm not sure. And so he, Jimpa's my hero. He's my hero. So I thought, we have established this school for consciousness studies. I'm going to call him up and invite him to talk. And I did. And he said yes. And we've done lots and lots of collaborations since then. And one of the wonderful, beautiful things that has come out of those collaborations is that he has asked me to sort of help introduce Khenze Rinpoche, Thupten Tenzin, sorry. I get flummoxed talking about Jinpa. So Khenze Rinpoche Thupten Tenzin, who has been teaching with us, and he was Jinpa's first teacher. And Jinpa kind of in his own ineffable way has kind of asked or kind of indicated or kind of made it happen that we were going to help Khenze Rinpoche Thupten Tenzin find a bridge into the modern teaching Buddhist environment after he had been the abbot for 6 years of the Kyoto Tantric Monastery in Dharamsala. So anyway, that's a background to tell you that Khenze Rinpoche is going to be teaching this great class with us this fall. And right now we're recording it. And the reason that I wanted to tell you all of that is because it's a class called In the Footsteps of the Buddha, and he goes to each of the places that were important in the Buddha's lifetime, gives you the context of the place, the geography of the place, and then gives a teaching related to the teaching that the Buddha gave. And he said something, it's something you've probably heard, it's something I've probably heard, but he was talking about Buddha's death at Kushnagar, and he was talking about how the first teaching is that he gave at Deer Park was on impermanence, and the last teaching he gave at Kushnagar was on impermanence, right? And he's going in about when you die, he's talking about Buddha's death. He describes Buddha's death, and then he talks about when you're dying, all you have. Wait, I have to set it up. When you're dying, you don't have your wealth. You don't have your friends, you don't have your family. All you have is your practice. we've heard that before, right? But the way that he said that was like, you know, that really hit me. And he said, when you practice Buddhism like this, you are an authentic Buddhist practitioner. And that hit me in a particular way. This is a great class. I can't wait for you guys to, if you want to take it, it's coming. So as Buddhist practitioners, you know, all we really have is our practice. And in depth hypnosis, all you have is yourself, your consciousness, your awareness, and the work that you are doing to transform your karmic patterns through the processes. Depth hypnosis is a quick path. It's a very quick, I sometimes say it's plant medicine slowed down. You know, it's a very quick path, but you have the, you know, in these times of difficulty, we have our practice. We have our capacity to change ourselves so that we can become more effective change agents for other people. And, you know, what I do is I train people how to do depth hypnosis for themselves and then to help other people, train other people so they can do it with other people so that we can become these change agents. And so, you know, in a very real way, you know, you see I'm a little bit proselytizing for depth hypnosis. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I know there are many paths to consciousness. This is not the only one. I'm not pretending that it is, but it is a really powerful path that is really relevant to today because it gives people a way to work with all of the trauma and all of the soul loss and all of the power loss that we are dealing with in the collective and personally today. And it defines it, describes it, you know, sets out a path and then moves toward it, you know, and then, you know, we see like, you know, trauma or us, you know, it's like, you know, we're gonna take care of that and we're gonna transform that. And you're gonna find out that that trauma was actually a gift, you know, but you don't have to think about that right now. Just, you know, we think about that later. But you know, that it is like, you know, like in my book, Coming to Peace, you know, the subtitle of it is resolving conflict within ourselves and with others. This is a conflict resolution process, but I wanted to call it, my subtitle was Finding Peace in the Heart of Conflict. Because you find peace in the heart of trauma with these processes. So the good news, that's the good news. The good news, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, good news. So anyway, I think I've done enough talking. You had a question. I'll take some questions.
Yes, please. Can you talk a little bit more about karmic?
Oh, I think you need to have a mic.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
It was beautiful what you just said. Could you please tell us a little bit more about that idea of karmic patterns? What explain to us a little bit more, yes?
I'll talk about karmic patterns all day. So a karmic pattern is a pattern, it's a pattern that emerges from the way that you cycle energy. And you might be cycling energy on a mental level. You might be cycling energy on an emotional level, on a mental level that's causing you problem, or on an emotional level that's causing you problem, on a spiritual level that's causing you problem, or on a physical level that's causing you problem. And most likely, it's all four, right? But let's look at a pattern on a mental level that a lot of people can relate to. When a person has something that they can't manage to kind of integrate or understand conceptually, they will come up with ways of coping. And basically actually trying to, and the way that they cope is by cycling energy away from the thing that's bothering them. And so on a mental level, if you, like, let's say you're feeling, you can't tolerate feeling out of control, right? A lot of people have that problem. So the antidote to that is to cycle energy in a particular way that makes sure that you're in control. So you have, like, so one of the classic ways that will manifest as what's called obsessive compulsive disorder. I have to do this, and if I do this, then that bad thing won't happen. And if I do that, that good thing will happen. And so then you spend all this time cycling your energy, making the bad thing not happen and making the good thing happen to make sure that you never get to the place that you're really trying to avoid, which is something that you can't digest conceptually, right? So there you have a whole set of patterns, attachment and aversion, see it right in there, right? So those patterns of cycling energy, you do it again and again, and you're constantly doing it, and that becomes which is part of a karmic pattern. It's a pattern of relating to reality and relating to yourself that is a function of the way that you're cycling your energy. And so then you're doing that around that one particular issue that you can't manage to digest, but then you do that with everything. Like you meet a new person and you start doing the OCD, right? Or you meet a new circumstance, you do the OCD. So pretty soon you forget who you are because you're so busy trying to make the bad thing not happen and make the good thing happen. And you forget it is what's in the middle. Who are you? Where is reality, right? And that's what happens with karmic patterns, people. And that's how you forget who you are. That's how you forget your Buddha nature, because you're so busy trying to control things on one level or another. Another way you see that really clearly is an addiction. So this is something that people know. Like, I never understood why people drink to like avoid something, because it seems like whenever I can't get near alcohol, because if I try to use alcohol as a medication, I'm like, I just get, it doesn't help me at all. But people they say that phrase, drink to forget, right? So I guess that really does work, or people think it's going to work, but what they're doing then is they're trying to forget something, right? So they're drinking and they're trying to drink more, and they have to drink more, and they have to drink more. And so then it becomes this pattern. That's a different kind of pattern. It's a consuming pattern. You're consuming the everything around you in an effort to stay filled up with something else other than the thing that you're trying to forget. So that's a different type of karmic pattern. So these karmic patterns become established. And of course, there's that expression in Buddhism, ancient twisted karma. Such a scary phrase, but it's so true, because we're all dealing with multiple karmic patterns. And people come into therapy when the ways that they've been cycling their energy through these patterns that are a function of their larger karmic patterns become unmanageable. And that's when we start. That's when we roll up our sleeves, get somebody up on the lift, and start tinkling, okay, we got to move this karmic pattern over here. We're going to take that one out, and then we're going to bring in some power over here, and then that's going to blast that other trauma out, and then we're going to grab it with the soul retrieval and bring it back to them, so we're tinkering with karmic patterns, but karmic patterns are serious business. I teach a class called Relationships and Karma. If you want to understand karmic patterns, and especially your own karmic pattern, maybe you don't want to take that class. All my handlers now, I have handlers, because it's just everything's too big, so especially on the computer, it's just like, so they're always telling me, you have to change the name of that class. And they say that is too scary, relationships and karma. And I said, they should be scared. You should be scared. One of the, of course, to become you have to be able to see your karmic patterns is actually a gift. And to be able to transform them is even a greater gift, because you can free yourself from so many things. But in that class, Relationships and Karma, we start with the premise of you've come in from another, this isn't the first rodeo. So, we are using the Buddhist concept of reincarnation, that there are a set of patterns that you are coming in with from a previous lifetime that you are incarnating with. And when you incarnate into the particular family pattern, in the particularly family that you're in, your response to the circumstances and personalities in the family will bring forward your karmic patterns. So it's important to see, and that is important to see that your responses are unique to you. This is why you can have an alcoholic family system with 5 siblings, and they all have completely different responses to the alcoholic system, right? That's a function of karma, right? And so then we look at that. We look at each of our responses in that class. We look at how did we respond to our father? How did we respond to our mother? And then we look at what that tells us about ourselves. And we do a lot of meditations to shift things. And then in the relationships and power class that I teach subsequent to that, or you don't have to take them in linear order, but it helps. And the relationships and power class, what we look at then is the way in which we are working with the defensive structures that are the essential karmic patterns. Our defensive structures are the places where you really find your karmic patterns. So then we look at what are the defensive structures that I'm using to establish relationships later in life. And so then it's called relationships in power, because you are angling around the other person with your defensive structures, with your karmic patterns, trying to keep them from making you vulnerable in the same way that your family did. And so then you establish relationships where, one thing that I always say in that class in depth hypnosis is you have 2 people with the same wounding with opposite responses, and those 2 people are always going to find each other in the bar, right? I see it even happens online. So then ideally in that relationship, then people would become aware, oh, here we have some, if we're having, I really liked you before I understood what my karmic patterns were and your karmic patterns were, but do we still like each other enough to see if we can't use this love that we have for each other to learn how to love ourselves? Could we try that? And so then that's what that, so you move into a place of greater awareness through the vehicle of relationship rather than creating more karma, right? So, does that help?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, are there any other questions?
Well, I will just comment that I am so relieved that I'm doing some retreat work next week, because after that answer, I need to say goodnight.
Well, you can take the relationships and karma class on demand before you go into the retreat. That'll give you some fodder. Yeah.
Thank you. This is super fascinating. I know you were coming here with, speaking to a Buddhist audience, but I'm so curious about the shamanic pieces of this as well. And if you could just shed a little bit more light on how that piece of it came in, or what it looks like in the process, or maybe you've already explained some of the things that you consider shamanic about it, but maybe just being a little more explicit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to skirt around it, yeah. Because we're a Buddhist audience. So the truth is that, there are many ways to practice shamanism. Okay, let's just start there. There are many different traditions and many different reasons for practicing shamanism. The applied shamanism, which is the processes that I've developed, or I've adapted some traditional shamanic work, are a little bit, they're a little bit different than traditional shamanic practice, because they're about empowering the person. Everything in depth hypnosis is we are taking practices that usually the shamanic practitioner would do for a passive client, and we are adapting them so that the person actually becomes their own shamanic practitioner in the hypnotherapeutic state. Okay, so what does that look like? So the three big, as I mentioned, the three big reasons for imbalance in shamanism are power loss, soul loss, and energetic interference. Power loss occurs when you've been exposed to a negative situation over time. Toxic family system, a bad boss who's taking credit for your work, living in an environmentally degraded place, so you have this sense of loss of power. And the symptoms of that are like depression, low-grade depression, low-grade anxiety, series of bad luck, you can have, some difficulty focusing, and the antidote to that is a power retrieval. And in a traditional shamanic setting, the shamanic practitioner would see, okay, this person needs a power retrieval, and they would work in an altered state of awareness, generally through the shamanic journey, which is a whole world that I teach, where you establish relationships with guides in the form of nature that are distillations of different forms of power that the earth holds. And you establish relationships with them. And as a practitioner, you work with those established relationships. You would work, for instance, with a guide who specializes in power retrieval. You would go into the journey, ask the guide, where is the power that is needed for this person? And the guide would bring that power, often in the form of a star or an animal or some other earth-based form. And you would be given that power, and then you would blow it into that person's energy system. Because when you're working as a shamanic practitioner, you're always working as a hollow bone. You're actually not really, you're doing a lot, but you're not, I'm like, I always feel like I'm a sous chef, like I'm just following orders, So, so that would be. Now, in applied shamanism, we do that. I teach people how to do that same process, but then we have a hypnotherapeutic process at the end of that, where the person is connecting with that power that's been brought to them, and they are establishing their own relationship with that power. And so that doesn't have to go through the shaman, right? Or the priest, get that, right? So then in depth hypnosis, we take it even further. And that process where we connect with the Buddha nature, that's also a process of power retrieval, because you are connecting with this power within you. You may perceive it as within you or outside of you, however you want to, doesn't matter how you perceive it, but you are connecting with a source of power that you had not connected with before. That's a power retrieval. And that is really important for healing, because if, I always say, the only reason people don't heal is because they don't have enough power. And so we spend a lot of time helping people remove obstacles to their power in the depth hypnosis process. But that's the first piece. Then soul retrieval is something that happens when someone has been exposed to trauma, any kind of trauma. Even being yelled at as a little kid, or, people, one of the things that I often say is that people don't recognize trauma anymore. We're so inured to trauma. It's like, in my generation, it was still like normal to hit your kids. That was good parenting, So, and that wasn't even when they were trying to be good parents, right? So you being hit as a kid, or being raped, or being in a car accident. Sometimes you can have a soul loss coming out of a surgery. And what happens with soul loss is the part of yourself that can get away from the trauma will get away. And that's why people go into shock from a shamanic point of view, because part of them has left. And when people come back to themselves, I don't know if you've ever seen this in a car accident. I've helped, I'm one of those people that always stops when there's a car accident, trying to help, can't do much, but I can do a few things, So, but, I'll watch people come back to themselves, see if they're coming back to themselves and coming out of the shock. That's helpful, but oftentimes those parts remain in the trauma, or they get lost in other parts of non-ordinary reality outside of the purview of the person's mind, or far away from the purview of their conscious mind. And so they need a soul retrieval. And in a traditional shamanic process, the shaman would go with a guide that they've established a relationship with. The guide would show them where that soul part is. They would bring that soul part back and blow it into the person's energy system. Now I teach that as well now, the traditional way, because sometimes people can't participate in their own healing and they just need someone to heal them, right? But if we encourage them, if you can, let's do the hypnotherapy process at the end of that process to help you connect with that soul part so that you can integrate it back into your life. Now, in depth hypnosis, the person becomes their own shaman, going back into that traumatic situation. They are going back, being guided through the processes of regression. They're going back in time. They are finding that part of themselves that has been caught in that trauma for who knows how long. It could be in a past life, current life, in utero, and they are bringing that soul part back themselves. And so it's a very empowering, holistic process. And that's, power retrievals and soul retrievals are the bread and butter of depth hypnosis, and we adapt them in this way. And the reason I really like shamanic healing is because it's so catalytic. Buddhism is kind of, unless you get into Vajrayana, it's very cool. But shamanism is hot. It's like I often feel like I'm in Black Ops. And I'm going in, and we've got the part of the self that has only the highest good. We're going in, we're gonna get to that trauma, and we are gonna go, and we are gonna be gently pulling that soul part out, but you're gonna, you're gonna have to face it, and on some level, it's not easy, but it's a relief, and then we come back out, and we're good. So and then energetic interference can take a lot of different forms. You can have soul part exchanges with other people where they've taken your power, or you've given them your power, or you can have a traditional energetic interference where you have a being who's non-corporal connected to your energy system that needs to be released. You could have an introject, you could have an aspect of someone that you've adopted, like if you saw your father getting enraged whenever he felt out of control and powerless, and then he could get his way, and then he could get anything he wanted, and however the angrier he got, the more he wanted. You think, oh, well, I'm gonna try that, so I'm gonna go around raging around to make sure I get what I want too. So now you've adapted your father's karmic pattern. It's your karmic pattern, otherwise you wouldn't have adapted it, so you can't say that it's his fault. So then you go around trying to cycle energy in the same way, right? And now you've got what is called in traditional clinical psych an introject, a part of another person that you are masquerading around with. And so that needs to be removed. And so we can do that with energetic interference release processes, which is done in an altered state of awareness. And the person, again, becomes their own shamanic practitioner. They are interacting with the energetic interference. They are getting information about it. They are making decisions about what they want to do. They're facilitated in doing that. Wherein, as a traditional shamanic practitioner would go in and just kind of do an extraction process, or some other kind of energetic interference release process for them. So there's some talking about shamanic healing. Yeah, you can see how it fits in with depth hypnosis. Yeah.
A couple of times you mentioned trauma being especially bad now in this modern age. A lot of the causes of trauma, violence and war, there's plenty of them, but they seem like way down. What do you think is going on now that is making things especially bad?
The biggest thing, I mean, I've been in practice for over 30 years, right? So I was in practice before social media. There was still movies and there were computer games starting at the time. I really think that I don't want to sound like, I know I may sound like some kind of conservative, Christian, which I completely respect conservative Christians, but I really think that the media and social media are really compounding the sense of being inured to trauma. Like the whole thing of you're playing a game and you're killing people, and that's fun. Whoa. You're killing people, right? It's like they forget, or you see, like, it's like, anytime you turn on the, any kind of media, there's someone who's like, there's something that's going down that is really bad for somebody, right? And it's like it has to be there, or it's not entertainment. That's entertainment, right? That's a problem. I mean, I'm sorry, like I try to be really tolerant, but I have a few places where I say, that's not okay. And I don't think that, and so people, and the truth is, even before all of this, all you had to do was be born and you have trauma, right? I mean, being born is traumatic, right? Just like the act of being born, right? I mean, so, and so there's already like baseline trauma. And then, hardly anyone is raised by a parent who actually is as aware as they might be of the child's needs, right? Even if they have really good intentions, And so people and a lot of parents are just not ready to be parents, and they're parenting, they're motherless mothers, they're fatherless fathers. How can they know? And there's this compounding of the trauma that moves down through the generations because people have not been loved. And so that's happening in ordinary reality, right? And then you have all of the social media and and then everything that can happen on social media. Now, like I have this thing from where I can't look at screens. So I don't know all the things that happen, but I know from my clients what happens on social media, and I'm kind of glad that I don't know firsthand what goes on, because it's, for me, like when I hear about it and I'm trying to help them, I feel the depth of their trauma with it. And people are really, they have lost track of what is traumatizing. And so and now we also have, and one of the reasons, and so what's happening now with all of that going on internally and per people's internal experience, that they're ingesting all of this entertainment. Now we have the external manifestation of that. And now we have so many wars, so much trauma. There's so much happening that any loving, thinking, living person, who's not involved in the trauma cannot help be traumatized by the fact that everyone is being so harmed. So we're in a trauma soup, and this is why, I'm in the process of writing a book on shamanism right now, because I really feel like, especially soul retrieval is the antidote to today. This power retrieval and soul retrieval. If I could do a power retrieval and soul retrieval for every person that I met, I would be so happy. You have to have permission, of course, to do the work, So, but it is life-changing. So, and to help people come out of, I think people get frozen in trauma. I mean, that's the nature of trauma. You get frozen, right? And you don't know what to do. You don't know where to go, and you're just like trying to function, And the wonderful thing about a soul retrieval is it kind of brings warmth back into the system. Things begin to move, So there's my thought on that. Sorry, I hope I didn't get too much on a soapbox there, but that is, I do think that, and it has really increased. The other thing that's really increased in the 30 years that I've been practicing is people don't think as clearly as they used to. They have trouble thinking. They have trouble thinking. We have a process in depth hypnosis. This is a big part of huge part of depth hypnosis I didn't mention, that is totally Buddhist in nature, and it's called insight inquiry. And it's basically interactive Vipassana meditation. So, with Vipassana, you're looking at something and you're of course, I never know, because here there's all these like advanced practitioners and new practitioners. So if I'm saying something you already know. So you have, with shamatha, with the quiescent meditation where you're focusing on your breath. And you're just coming to one-pointed awareness. When you've managed to kind of get your mind to be able to do that, in a more or less stable way, you can begin to use what Bob Thurman. He's Robert Thurman. I teach with him, and he always uses this expression, and I love it: the diamond drill of your mind. And you can begin to use the diamond drill of your mind with Vipassana to begin to look into the nature of something once you've got your mind settled, right? So we have this process called insight inquiry, where rather than looking into your mind, once you've got attained shamatha and you're working with the Vipassana to try to plumb into, open the issue that you're trying to understand, we have something called insight inquiry, where we just ask a question and you only ask a question based on what the person has said. You never give advice, you never give counsel, you never talk about your own experience. You're only staying with the person's experience and asking questions based on what they've said. So that is interactive Vipassana, and that will help you, people. It'll help you as a practitioner see how well people are tracking logic sequences, and to see what kinds of wires people have crossed in terms of misknowing. And I see people these days, they have much more trouble tracking, much more trouble. And I think that's also probably a function of social media. There's like, everything is instant. You don't have to think through things. You don't have to remember things, I used to know everybody I knew's phone number. And I could spell any word. You didn't need a dictionary. You didn't need, now you don't even need a dictionary, but I used to I still have all that in my head, but nobody has that in their head. Nobody's, they don't learn to spell because they don't have to, I'm a language teacher first, the first thing I ever taught was language, so, I have a thing about spelling and grammar. Just joking, I don't judge anyone on their spelling capacity. But anyway, any other questions?
I know how to get into a jhanic state, but could you compare and contrast the jhanic state and the shamanic trance?
Okay, so depth hypnosis works with many different forms of altered states of awareness. So the first, so I'm going to get there, I promise. So the first altered state of awareness we work with is that semi-guided meditation, where you're working with suggestions for relaxation, and there's a big focus on breath. Like, there's a whole big focus on breath in that first trance, where you're helping a person calibrate with their breath, and then you're helping them move into a place within themselves that they, you say it's a place where you have been, where you have felt comfortable and at peace, so you're bringing them into that place. And so there, with the first trance, you're helping them move into an altered state of awareness, which is, it sort of stops at the it pays homage to the shamatha state, where you're just getting a unified focus with your breath. And then you are using that unified focus to focus more deeply on your inner experience. And that is a process where, as in all the depth hypnosis processes, where you are working with the luminosity of the world beyond the conscious mind, but you're working with the conscious mind's organizing capacity to help them be able to track their experience. I call it the littoral zone, littoral, that place where the sea meets the sand and where the sandpipers run. So you have the subconscious coming in, beyond conscious coming in, and then you have the sand with the ocean, and then you have the sand of the conscious mind organizing things. So there's that level of awareness. Then with suggestion hypnosis, you often take people a little bit more deeply, so they're more in that jhanic place where they're like very, they're like not really interacting. They're just allowing their awareness to open, and they're receiving the energetic imprints of the suggestions, which is why it's so important to have the people make their own suggestions. It's such a bad idea to have some canned thing be inserted into your subconscious. I haven't. I'll get on a soapbox about that. So there's a much deeper state. Now, then we'll also work. Often I will work with meditation itself in session, especially if a person has been overwhelmed. A lot now these days, I have so many people. I mean, I've always specialized in spiritual emergencies, but now, it's like I've got, a traffic jam because of all the plant medicine that they haven't been well mediated, these circles, and people are coming in, and so they need the shamatha meditation to create the space, right? We're just going to create space and see what we got here, right? So we will work with that. And then with the shamanic journey is something that we also work with in depth hypnosis. We will often teach people how to journey within the therapeutic process. And then I actually ask all my clients to take the shamanic journey class that I teach, because then you can do a whole bunch of homework in between and you get a lot more work done with the journey. But the shamanic journey is, the state of awareness of the shamanic journey is a state that incorporates the unified focus. You have to be able to be focused in your mind, and you have to be able to focus on a particular thing and follow a particular thing. It's a little different than just being focused on your breath. You're following experience. You have to be able to track experience. So again, it's not that deep jhanic place, but it's a little bit deeper than, it's about the same depth as the work that you do when you're working with the regression work, because again, you have to be able to track. And with the shamanic journey, you're tracking yourself with the help of the drum. It's not this, it's much faster. It's a sonic driver that's altering the state of awareness. And so you have to be able to track on your own with the shamanic journey. And when you're working in a regression process, you've got the practitioner guiding you. And again, you're working in that literal zone. So really the only place in depth hypnosis where you might go into those deeper states is in suggestion hypnosis. All these different levels.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For being here.
Oh, thank you.
And sharing this work. It's definitely trying to drink from the fire hose. There's so much depth in what you're offering in the depth. I really feel like I have 5,000 questions, but I'd really love to meet the instruments you brought.
Oh, yes.
I would love to hear about them, and
Sure.
my eyes keep going to them. so.
Okay, all right. By the way, if you are interested in learning more, let me just take a minute. I will, I promise I'll get there. I'm going to teach the Depth Hypnosis Foundation course starting next Thursday. If you want to do a whole bunch of personal work fast, that's a good place to do it. It's also a good way to learn how to work with someone else, right? So it's a 2 4-day weekends, this coming weekend, and then the weekend of the 10th. Weekend of the 10th of August. So it's 2 weeks apart. And that class, again, people will often take that class to do personal work, but they will often take that class to do professional work too. And if there's anyone who's a therapist and they need CEUs, we've got those. It will give you a comprehensive, very, very deep understanding of depth hypnosis. So if you go to sacredstream.org, you can find out all about it. I just mentioned that because you were saying you were in the fire hose. So it's still a little bit of a fire hose. No, it's not a fire hose, right? But it's a well-managed fire hose, right? Did you think you were? Yeah. But there's also a lot of, that's another thing we work with in depth hypnosis. We work with the elements. We learn how to work. In the advanced depth hypnosis class, we are literally doing tantric work and bringing in the elements into the therapeutic environment. So anyway, we can talk about that. But now I'll talk about my instruments. So this is a drum. And this has got a really nice throat for a small drum. Right? So this is the beat that you would work with the shamanic journey. And so that's one reason you have the drum. But as a shamanic practitioner, the drum really is your primary tool. It becomes, I'm teaching right now, I'm in the middle of teaching. I can't believe all the things I'm teaching right now. But I'm in the middle of teaching advanced applied shamanism. And one of the things that I was saying in class when we were doing the drum initiations the other day is that, the drum becomes the portal between non-ordinary reality and ordinary reality. It becomes, you channel in, all the things that you can't bring through your own system come through the drum and work when you're doing healings. There's so many things you can do with the drum and healing. I wish we could do one now. We don't have time. Okay, but so drum. Okay, the rattle is also super important. It's in that both of these are ways of altering the state of awareness. And both of them, I especially use the rattle to move energy around. Like you can gather energy, focus energy, remove energy, right? Very handy tool. And I really like this rattle. I have a lot of rattles. This one is one of my students gave me this rattle, and I'm so appreciative of this rattle. And this is, right here is this, I don't usually talk about this. This is a stone that when you're working shamanically, there's something called having power objects. And this is a very powerful stone that was found in a dry creek bed in New Zealand. It's very heavy, and it's my teaching stone. And I did tell my partner that, I need to be cremated with it. That's all that'll be left. but I want to die with this. So I will let it go. But anyway. but not yet. So I bring this whenever I'm teaching. You know, it helps hold power while I'm teaching. Yeah, so, thank you. Yeah. Okay, we've got 5 minutes. And the last question, anything online? Everybody's been really quiet online. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm lurking here in the corner crying because every word is just a gem and really cutting close to the bone, and a fire hose, yes. I'm a bit curious about the somatics of it. So kind of the, for some of these karmic patterns that you're talking about, how those live really deeply conditioned in like that primal, primitive body. And how, for something like soul retrieval, for example, how to retrieve a soul into a body that doesn't feel safe. And maybe that's also part of a karmic pattern, is the unsafe vessel, right? So just how depth hypnosis really speaks to that and interplays with that.
Sure. So depth hypnosis, I mean, I remember I've been practicing depth hypnosis for like 10 years, and I started hearing this word somatic. I'm like, somatic? You mean the body? We've been working with the body for a long time here, you know? We didn't need this fancy word somatic, you know? No, but, there's a whole thing. So, I described to you the way in which we locate experience within the body and help translate that into energetic patterns and follow those energetic patterns into a person's experience across time, right? That's one way of working with the body in depth hypnosis. But I think the thing that you're talking about is the relationship between the mind and the body, right? So if you have a body that doesn't feel safe, then of course what we want to do is we want to help it feel safe. And what the first thing that we would do is establish a relationship with a guide that can help with that process. And that might take, when someone's in a lot of fear, it might take several rounds of trying to connect, trying to find that part, like just moving gently, whenever there's a lot of fear, it needs to be respected. Whenever there's resistance, it needs to be respected. And but you need to have that anchor so that you can begin to resolve the relationship between the mind and the body, right? And in my book, Coming to Peace, I talk a lot about this is a conflict resolution process that's used throughout depth hypnosis and the couples counseling, the family counseling, the community counseling. But there's also this is the same process that's used between parts of the self. So if you have a body that doesn't feel safe, it's likely that it has a disrupted relationship with your mind or your spirit. So probably your mind. So then we have a process where we facilitate a coming to peace process between the two. And again, when there's a part of the self that is in a lot of fear, generally there's some work to be done on a trauma level to do soul retrievals to get that part to the place where it can begin to function and begin to come into a sense of itself beyond the trauma. So that would be how we would work with what you're working with, chapter 4. Okay, all right, I think we should probably close. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really love this community, and I feel very grateful to be here with you. Let's go ahead and close circle. We'll say those same things we said at the beginning. The sun is a circle. The moon is a circle. The earth is a circle. The drum is a circle. We are a circle within a circle. Thank you, everyone.